boy Osas. In today's episode of our WhatsApp clone series, we're going to continue to build out our chat room screen. In our last episode, if you remember, we built out the scaffolding for the chat room screen, which was basically the nav bar and this text input area. It looks pretty clean, but we have more work to do. So the focus for this episode is replacing this placeholder views with a UI table view. And why a UI table view? Well, let's go right into Xcode. So let's resume our SwiftUI preview. Right now, we're using a scroll view with a lazy V stack. And generally speaking, that is not a problem for most projects, but for most messaging apps, we are going to have to paginate inversely. So generally speaking, when you're paginating, you're scrolling to the bottom and then you're fetching more items. And as you can imagine, in the case of a WhatsApp clone, in the case of a messaging functionality, we're going to be scrolling upwards to get the historical messages, all the older messages. And so to do that with the built-in SwiftUI scroll view and lazy VStack component does not work. Also, lazy VStack is actually not that lazy. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So generally speaking, lazy VStack does not reuse items. So if you scroll to 200 items on screen, right, and you scroll 20 more items, well, it's going to create actual 220 rectangles, right? As opposed to the UI table view and the UI collection view, which are UIKit elements, the legacy UIKit elements, there's this concept of reusable items, which means if there are 500 elements in our list, it's only going to create, let's say, for example, 20 rectangles, and it's going to reuse those boxes over and over and over again. And so the point is, it's very efficient. And when you're dealing with large amounts of data sets, I would always advise you to probably default to using some sort of a UI table view or UI collection view as opposed to using a lazy VStack. And so with that explanation in the bag, it's pretty straightforward to build a UI table view thanks to UI view representable that allows us to be able to interrupt UIKit with SwiftUI components. And so we are going to go right into that. We're going to go into our chats folder inside of the, nope, I did not want to do that. Inside of the views, I am going to create a new file. It's going to be a Swift file this time around, and I am going to call it MessageListController. This is a UIKit terminology. I know, but bear with me. It's pretty simple, actually. So first things first, we're going to import UIKit, since we're going to be creating a UIKit component and then wrapping that inside of a SwiftUI UI view representable. So I'm going to create a final class. I'm going to call it MessageListController. It's going to be of type UI view controller. And then I'm going to create some markers. So this is going to be views lifecycle. And this is going to be viewDidLoad. I'm going to do super.viewDidLoad. So we're going to write a bunch of boilerplate code right now. This will take a little bit of time, but just bear with me and code along. All right. So we have a viewDidLoad. I'll create another marker for properties. And let's get started. And I'm going to create another one before we get started, for methods. So the first thing that we actually want to create is a table view. So I'm going to create a private lazy var table view. And it's going to be of type UI table view. Let's table view. And I'm going to return the table view. Now, this is called an anonymous closure, and this allows us to be able to neatly wrap the properties that are related to the specific components. So I'm going to say table view.delegate is equals to self, table view.data source is equals to self as well. And I'll probably just make the table view background color red so we can see what we're working with. Background color is equals to red. The next step is we need to create a function to use auto layouts to anchor our table view to the screen. So I'll say func setup views. And then I'm going to call that setup view on viewDidLoad. So the viewDidLoad is sort of like the function that gets called once this view has been loaded into memory. This only gets called once. This is not the same thing as viewDidAppear or viewWillAppear, which are basically UIKit lifecycle methods. All right, now let's fix this errors that we're having. So it's yelling at us that MessageListController does not conform to UI table view delegate. And the way to fix that is we can just create an extension down here, which is going to be of MessageListController, and we're going to conform to those table view delegates that it's yelling about. So UI table view delegates, UI table view data source. Okay, and I like to have markers and extensions like this. I'm going to call it UI table view and UI data source. Okay, so let's start conforming to this delegates and data source. So we need self for item. We need number of items or number of rows. And what else do we need? We need height for row in section. And now we're going to handle all of these things one at a time. Just hang in there. The first things we need to do is we need to position this table view in the screen. And the way to do that is called auto layouts in UIKit. So we're going to add it as a sub view of the view. And I'm going to come back here and actually translate this. Translate auto masking constraint into auto resizing mask into constraint is equals to false. Again, a lot of this is just UIKit boilerplate code. So then we need to let's see. Let's think for a second. We need to anchor our constraints. So I'm going to say init layout constraints, the activate constraints, and we need an array of constraints. Okay, the first things first, I want to make sure the table view is anchored to the top. So I'm going to say table view, the top anchor, the constraints equals to view dot top anchor. Table view, the leading anchor, the constraints is equals to view dot leading anchor. And table view, the bottom anchor, the constraints equals to view dot bottom anchor. Sorry, I'm going to change this from left anchor to leading anchor. Leading anchor is the more modern one. So I'm going to say table view, the trailing anchor, the constraints is equals to view dot trailing anchor. All right. And then the next thing we need to do is we need to register our table view cell. So we're going to do table view, the register, and let's just say UI table view cell dot self, which is the type. And we're going to create a cell reuse identifier up here. And I'm just going to call it MessageListController cells. Doesn't matter for now. So this is going to be our cell identifier. Okay, so now let us actually complete this table view delegates and data source. So we're going to dequeue the cell. The identifier is the identifier we just created for index paths. We're going to return that cell. Let's make the cell background color equals to UI color dot gray dot opacity of 0.1. And now let's return 20 elements. And then for the height of each individual item, we're going to return automatic dimension. I believe there's a UI table view dot automatic dimension. It's going to auto resize itself for us. All right, I know that's a little bit of code, but that's UI kit for you. It's quite verbose. So we have sort of the scaffolding here. So we created our table view, we registered our cell, we anchored our table view to the screen, we conform to our table view delegate. Now let us go wrap this message list controller inside of a message list view, which is just a UI view representable. So we're going to go up here inside of our view in our chat folder. We're going to create a SwiftUI view this time around. Yes. And we're going to call it message list view. I think that's a good name. All right, so what's our message list view, right? What's a message list view? It's going to be of type, it's a SwiftUI view, but we're going to be using a UI view representable as opposed to just a UI view controller representable actually. Because remember, our message list controller here is a UI view controller. So message list view is going to be of type UI view controller representable. We're going to remove the body. We're going to need to conform it to certain things, which is the UI view representable conformance. So it's going to be of type message list controller. Okay, so now we're going to make view controller. Okay, I'm going to close this left panel so we can see what we're working on. And the way to make our view controller is just to say message list controller. We're going to assign it to this message list controller, and we're going to return that message list controller. And I'm also going to conform to the update UI view controller. We don't need that right now. So I'm just going to make that empty. Now let's remove some of the space that we have here. Let's resume. Look at that. This is our message list right now. So let's go back to our message list controller. Inside of our message list controller, let us remove this background color for now. And let's go back to our message list view and let's see what that does. Okay, so as you can see, we have a list of items or a list of rows. So we're going to take this message list view. We're going to go inside of our chat room screen and we're going to take this entire scroll view. You see the scroll view that we have here? We're going to remove that and we're going to replace it with our message list view and initialize that. So let us align our items and look at that. We have a UI collection view, a UI table view, sorry, right now. Okay, so the first part of our agenda is done. We have created our message list controller. We have anchored them, dequeued them. The next thing I would like for us to do is to do something like is to actually dequeue the cell. So let us think out of our message list controller in our cell for row method. I believe that's what it's called. Yep, cell for row. We're going to do something. We're going to configure our cells to use a SwiftUI view. And thanks to some of the latest API that Apple has released, we can do something called content configuration. And so just follow along. Okay, now I am going to import, we're going to need to import SwiftUI. So we're going to go above here, import SwiftUI, and boom. Okay, so we have a UI hosting configuration, not controller, UI hosting configuration for our cell. essentially, this allows us to be able to use a SwiftUI view as the cell for UI kit, UI table view. I know that's like a handful, but the TLDR is we can use a UI kit component like table view and use a SwiftUI view as the cell. So that's essentially what this UI hosting configuration allows us to do. And I believe that started in iOS 16. So now let's go back to our message list view. So if we open our panel, message list view, let's see what we have here. Okay, as you can see, a message list view has these placeholder items. If I go back to the message list controller, you could pause the video and type in this placeholder code. But essentially, it's just a text component with a large font, bold frame, sort of like what we had in the last episode, what we used as our placeholder items. And now we have a fully functioning UI table view controller. So if we go back to our chat room screen now, let's see what that really looks like. And it looks like this. So that's awesome. That's a good amount of progress. I would say the next step for us in the next episode is to start building our bubble views, as I call it. So that's going to be our text bubble, our image bubble, our video bubbles, and all of those other components that are actually going to be responsible for displaying messages that a user has sent to you. So that's it for this episode. Thank you for joining. Please like and subscribe. See you in the next one.